The German shepherd's ribs pushed against his skin like prison bars as he struggled to stand. Each labored breath seemed to drain what little strength remained in his once powerful frame. Oak Ridge locals had grown accustomed to averting their eyes when passing Frank Delaney's property, pretending not to see the animal chained in the yard. All except 8-year-old Lily Harlow. Through the chain-link fence, their eyes met the child's, bright with innocence, the dog's clouded with despair. For $3 worth of hot dogs. Nathan Harlow reluctantly handed 5 crisp $100 bills to a man who didn't deserve a penny. "You're a fool," Frank spat, pocketing the money, paying premium for damaged goods. But when the leash changed hands, something extraordinary happened. The skeletal dog, trembling from weakness and fear, slowly lowered himself before Nathan, his front legs bent until his chin touched the dirt, eyes fixed upward in an unmistakable gesture of reverence. Not gratitude, worship. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Virginia wasn't the kind of place that made the map, but it was the kind of town where people still nodded when passing on the street. A place where the tallest building was the 3-story courthouse, and where most families went back at least 4 generations. Nathan Harlow wasn't born here, but after marrying local girl Claire Thompson 8 years ago, the town had gradually accepted him as one of their own. The modest yellow 2-story on Maple Street that Nathan and Lily called home sat on the edge of town. A 15-minute walk from Oak Ridge Elementary. It was too much house for just the two of them now, with rooms that stayed closed and photo frames that stayed dusty. 3 years had passed since the hit-and-run that took Claire, but grief still hung in the corners like cobwebs neither of them had the heart to sweep away. Nathan worked as the foreman at Peterson Construction, building houses for other families while his own remained broken. At 42, his once dark hair was salted with gray at the temples, his face weathered not just from working outdoors, but from the strain of raising a daughter alone. He carried himself with the straight-backed discipline of his army days, as if proper posture alone could hold everything together. Lily had her mother's eyes, hazel flecked with gold, and a quiet resilience that sometimes made Nathan forget she was only 8. Since Claire died, she'd become a serious child, her smile appearing less frequently, like a bird that had learned to be cautious about when to show itself. Mrs. Wilson from next door watched her after school until Nathan got home at 5:30. The elderly widow always ready with neighborhood gossip and casseroles that tasted vaguely of cigarettes. The day Lily first saw the dog was an ordinary Tuesday in April. The path home from school skirted the edge of Frank Delaney's property, a rundown ranch house with peeling paint and a yard full of engine parts. Frank had moved to Oak Ridge 5 years ago, an ex-prison guard with a perpetual scowl who kept to himself except when drinking at the Rusty Nail on Friday nights. People said he'd been fired from the state penitentiary, though nobody knew exactly why. He wasn't the kind of man you asked personal questions. What everyone did know was that Frank Delaney was cruel to that German shepherd. The first time Lily spotted the dog, she almost missed him. He was lying motionless in the dirt, his coat so dusty and dull that he blended into the patchy ground of Delaney's backyard. The only reason she noticed him at all was the slight movement of his rib cage up and down, the only sign he was alive. Lily paused at the chain-link fence, her small fingers curling around the metal links. The German shepherd's ears twitched at her presence, and slowly, painfully, he raised his head. Their eyes met across the yard. In that moment, something passed between them. a recognition that Lily couldn't have named, but felt deep in her chest, a tightening, like the feeling she got when looking at her mother's photographs. "Hey there," she whispered, pressing her face against the fence. The dog's tail moved once, a weak thump against the dirt, before his head lowered again, the effort of holding it up too much for his emaciated frame. A crash from inside the house made them both jump. The dog's ears flattened against his skull, and Lily took a step back, suddenly aware that she shouldn't be there. Mrs. Wilson had warned her more than once about that Delaney character and his temper. She hitched her backpack higher on her shoulders and continued home. But the image of those sad brown eyes followed her all the way. That night at dinner, Lily pushed her spaghetti around her plate, unusually quiet. Nathan watched her from across the table, concerned. "Everything okay at school today, kiddo?" he asked, reaching for his glass of water. Lily nodded, twirling pasta around her fork without lifting it to her mouth. "Dad, can I have a hot dog in my lunch tomorrow?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "A hot dog? Since when do you like hot dogs?" Lily shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Jenny had one today. It looked good." "Sure, I guess," Nathan said, making a mental note to pick up hot dogs during his next grocery run. "Anything else you want to try?" "No, just hot dogs," Lily said, finally taking a bite of her dinner. The next day, Nathan packed Lily's lunch with a hot dog wrapped in foil, alongside her usual apple and juice box. When he picked her up from Mrs. Wilson's after work, the elderly woman mentioned that Lily had barely touched her dinner. Said she wasn't hungry, Mrs. Wilson reported, cigarette dangling from her lips as she stood in her doorway. "Not like her to waste food." Nathan frowned. "She asked for a hot dog in her lunch today. Maybe she filled up on that." Mrs. Wilson shook her head. "Children these days with their picky eating. In my day, you ate what was put in front of you, or you didn't eat at all." The pattern continued for nearly 2 weeks. Every morning, Lily would ask for not just 1, but 2 hot dogs in her lunch. Nathan complied, though his curiosity grew when Mrs. Wilson reported that Lily still didn't seem to have much appetite in the afternoons. "Maybe she's coming down with something," he suggested. But Lily showed no signs of illness. If anything, she seemed brighter, more animated than she had been in months. One Wednesday, Nathan checked his watch as he pulled into Mrs. Wilson's driveway. He was 20 minutes early, a rarity since Claire died, and he'd shouldered all the family responsibilities alone. As he walked up to the house, he noticed Mrs. Wilson peering through her living room curtains, phone pressed to her ear. "Well, speak of the devil. He's here now," she said loudly as she opened the door. "I was just telling Betty Miller about your girl." Nathan tensed. "Something wrong with Lily?" "Not wrong exactly," Mrs. Wilson said, ushering him inside. The house smelled of potpourri and cat litter. "But she's been sneaking off on her way home from school. Takes the long way round past the Delaney place." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Frank Delaney, the drunk Mrs. Wilson nodded gravely. "Saw her there yesterday, standing at his fence. I called to her, but she pretended not to hear me, scurried off like a rabbit." "Did you see her talking to Delaney?" Nathan asked, alarm rising in his throat. No. Never saw hide nor hair of him. Just her standing there looking at something in his yard. Thought you ought to know." Nathan thanked her and collected Lily, who was reading in the spare bedroom Mrs. Wilson kept for her grandchildren's visits. On the drive home, He studied his daughter in the rearview mirror, noting the way she gazed out the window, lost in thought. It wasn't like Lily to be secretive. Ever since Claire died, they'd been a team, honest with each other out of necessity, if nothing else. That night, after Lily went to bed, Nathan opened the refrigerator and counted the hot dogs in the package, 6 missing since he'd bought them 3 days ago. He thought about Mrs. Wilson's report, about Lily's sudden interest in food she'd never liked before, and made a decision. The next day, Nathan called in late to work. After dropping Lily at school, he drove back home and waited. At 3 o'clock, he parked his truck a block from the school and watched as Lily emerged from the building, her red backpack bouncing as she walked. Instead of turning right toward Mrs. Wilson's, she went left, toward the edge of town. Nathan followed at a distance, keeping his truck well behind her. Sure enough, Lily stopped when she reached Frank Delaney's property. Nathan parked and approached on foot, staying behind a large oak tree where he could observe without being seen. What he witnessed made his heart twist in his chest. Lily stood at the fence, carefully pushing something through the chain links. On the other side, the German shepherd he'd glimpsed occasionally when driving past Delaney's house approached cautiously, head low, tail tucked. The dog took whatever Lily offered the hot dogs. Nathan realized so gently it was as if he feared the food might be taken away at any moment. "Good boy," Lily whispered, loud enough for Nathan to hear. "I brought you extra today." The dog finished the food and looked up at her, those soulful eyes seeming to say more than words ever could. Lily reached her small hand through the fence, and after a moment's hesitation, the dog inched forward to sniff her fingers. He gave them a quick lick before backing away, ears alert to any sound from the house. The front door of Delaney's home banged open, and Frank himself stumbled out, beer can in hand. "Hey!" he shouted when he spotted Lily. "Get away from my property, you little brat!" Nathan was moving before he even realized it, stepping out from behind the tree as Frank advanced toward his daughter. Lily backed away from the fence, fear plain on her face. "That dog bit my last neighbor's kid," Frank lied loudly, his words slurring. "You trying to get yourself hurt?" "I wasn't doing anything," Lily said, her voice small but defiant. Frank spotted Nathan approaching and straightened slightly. "This your kid? Better teach her to stay away from other people's property." Nathan placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "We're leaving," he said coldly, meeting Frank's bloodshot eyes. "Come on, Lily." As they walked away, Nathan glanced back at the German shepherd. The dog had retreated to the shadows beneath a rusted truck chassis, only his eyes visible in the darkness. Behind them, Frank kicked at the fence and shouted something unintelligible before staggering back into his house. "Lily," Nathan said once they were safely in his truck, "what were you thinking? That man is dangerous." "The dog is hungry, Dad," Lily said, tears welling in her eyes. "He never feeds him. He hits him with a stick. I've seen it." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You can't just go to strangers' houses, especially not someone like Frank Delaney." "But the dog needs help," Lily insisted. "He's so skinny, and he's got sores on his legs from the chain. Someone has to help him," looking at his daughter's determined face, so like her mother's when Claire had made up her mind about something. Nathan felt a familiar ache in his chest. "Let me think about it. Okay. But promise me you won't go back there alone. Promise me. Lily." "I promise," she said softly, wiping her eyes. "But we have to do something. Dad, we have to." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. He typed "Animal Abuse Laws, Virginia" into the search bar and frowned at the results. While animal cruelty was illegal, enforcement was complicated and outcomes uncertain. The system seemed designed to address problems after the worst had already happened, not to prevent suffering. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of his daughter's expectations. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes the world didn't work the way it should? That sometimes bad people got away with doing bad things? His gaze drifted to the refrigerator where Claire's photograph was held by a magnet shaped like Virginia. She was laughing in the picture, hair blowing across her face, caught mid-motion as she turned toward the camera. Nathan remembered that day clearly, a picnic at Oak Ridge Lake. 6 months before the accident, she'd been talking about getting a dog. "Lily needs a pet," Claire had insisted. "Something to care for. It builds character." Nathan had resisted. Ever since he'd been attacked by a neighbor's Rottweiler at age 9, requiring 27 stitches in his arm, he'd kept his distance from dogs. Claire knew this but pressed anyway, in her gentle but persistent way. "Not all dogs are like that one." "Nate," she'd said, reaching for his hand across the picnic blanket. "The right dog would be part of our family." He'd promised to think about it, the way you promise things when you don't want to argue but have no intention of following through. Then the accident happened, and the conversation was filed away with all the other future discussions they'd never have. Nathan closed his laptop and picked up the phone. Jim Townsend had been sheriff of Oak Ridge County for nearly 2 decades. More importantly, he'd been Claire's cousin and remained one of the few people Nathan felt he could trust. If anyone would know what could be done about Delaney's dog, it would be Jim. The sheriff answered on the 3rd ring, his voice gruff with sleep. Nathan apologized for the late call and explained the situation. "Frank Delaney," Jim said, suddenly sounding more awake. "I know him all too well. Got a whole file on him, though nothing that's stuck yet. Drunk driving, disturbing the peace. Couple of domestic calls before his wife took off." "What about the dog?" Nathan asked. "Lily says he's starving it, beating it." There was a long pause on the line. "I could send a deputy out for a welfare check, but without clear evidence." He trailed off. "Frank's good at keeping things just this side of legal. And between us, the county animal control is overwhelmed and underfunded. So there's nothing we can do." Nathan felt a familiar frustration rising, the same helplessness he'd experienced when the police investigation into Claire's hit-and-run had gone cold. "I didn't say that," Jim replied. "Tell you what, come by the station tomorrow. There's something you should see." The sheriff's office smelled of coffee and gun oil. The walls lined with community service awards and faded photographs of past departments. Jim led Nathan to his cluttered desk and pulled a file from a drawer. "Before I show you this," he said, "I need to know how serious you are about helping this dog." "My daughter won't let it go," Nathan said, then admitted, "and having seen the condition he's in, neither can I." Jim nodded and opened the file. I thought the dog looked familiar when Delaney first showed up with him. Took me a while to place him." He slid a newspaper clipping across the desk. The headline read, "K9 Hero Saves Officers in Standoff." Below it was a photograph of a magnificent German shepherd standing proudly beside a uniformed officer. The dog's coat was glossy black and tan, his posture alert and confident, nothing like the broken animal in Delaney's yard. "That's the same dog?" Nathan asked incredulously. "His name is Duke," Jim said. "He was one of the best police dogs in the state program, specialized in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. That incident in the article. He took a bullet meant for his handler during a meth lab raid. Saved 3 officers' lives that day." Nathan studied the photograph, trying to reconcile the heroic animal pictured with the skeletal creature he'd seen. What happened? How did he end up with someone like Delaney? Jim shook his head. Duke was retired after recovering from his injuries. His handler couldn't take him, moved into an apartment that didn't allow large breeds. The department tried to find him a good home, but somehow he fell through the cracks. Next thing we know, Frank Delaney shows up in town with him. How's that possible? A decorated police dog just given away to anyone? That's what I'd like to know, Jim said grimly. I've made some calls, but records are conveniently missing. Between us, I think money changed hands somewhere it shouldn't have. Nathan felt sick. Can't you just take him, given his history? Without evidence of criminal neglect, my hands are tied. Frank has paperwork showing he acquired Duke legally. Whatever strings he pulled to make that happen. Jim leaned forward. But nothing says you can't make him an offer. You think he'd sell the dog? Frank Delaney doesn't care about that animal. From what I've seen, he barely remembers to feed himself, let alone a dog. But he does care about money, especially for his next bottle. Jim sat back in his chair. It's worth a try. That evening, as Nathan helped Lily with her homework at the kitchen table, he broached the subject carefully. I talked to Sheriff Townsend today about the dog at Mr. Delaney's house, he began. Lily's head snapped up from her math worksheet. You did, can he help? It's complicated, honey. But I thought maybe... What if we tried to buy the dog from Mr. Delaney? Her eyes widened. You mean bring him home to live with us? Nathan hadn't actually thought that far ahead. The idea of having a dog, any dog in his house, still made him uneasy. But the hope blooming on his daughter's face made it impossible to back down. If Mr. Delaney agrees to sell him, yes. Lily launched herself from her chair and threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. Now, hold on, Nathan cautioned, gently disentangling himself. I don't know if he'll agree, and if he does, well, that dog isn't well. Lily, he might be sick. He might not. He couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. We'll take care of him, Lily said with absolute conviction. We'll make him better. The next day was Saturday. Nathan drove to Frank Delaney's house alone, having left Lily with stern instructions to stay at Mrs. Wilson's until he returned. The elderly woman had raised her eyebrows when he explained where he was going, but offered no comment beyond. Lord works in mysterious ways. Frank's truck was in the driveway, its faded blue paint peeling like the house it served. Nathan parked behind it and sat for a moment, steeling himself. Through the chain-link fence, he could see the German shepherd Duke. He corrected himself, lying in the same spot as before, chain wrapped around a metal stake driven into the dirt. The dog raised his head at the sound of the truck door closing, then lowered it again when he saw it wasn't his owner. Nathan approached the front door and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door swung open, revealing Frank Delaney in a stained undershirt and jeans, eyes bloodshot and narrowed against the morning light. "The hell do you want?" Frank demanded, recognition slowly dawning. "You're that kid's father." "Nathan Harlow," he introduced himself, not offering his hand. "I'd like to talk to you about your dog." Frank snorted. "Come to complain? Told your girl to stay away? Not my fault if she doesn't listen." "Actually," Nathan said, keeping his voice level despite the anger simmering beneath the surface, "I'd like to buy him." This caught Frank by surprise. He stared at Nathan for a moment before letting out a harsh laugh. "Buy him what for? He's a useless mutt. Nevertheless, I'm interested. $500. Frank's laughter cut off abruptly. His eyes narrowed, calculating. 500 for that bag of bones. "Take it or leave it," Nathan said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. He'd withdrawn the cash that morning, a significant chunk of the emergency fund he kept in a lockbox at home. "What's the catch?" Frank asked suspiciously. "Dog's not worth 50, let alone 500. "No catch. My daughter's taken a shine to him, that's all." Frank scratched his stubbled chin, considering. "Make it 750. 500, Nathan repeated firmly. "Cash. Right now. Or I walk away." For a moment, he thought Frank might refuse out of spite, then greed won out, as Jim had predicted it would. Frank snatched the envelope from Nathan's hand and thumbed through the bills. "Fine. Take the mutt. He's more trouble than he's worth anyway." They walked around to the back of the house. As they approached, Duke struggled to his feet, tail tucked low, eyes wary. Frank grabbed the chain roughly, yanking the dog forward. "Doesn't bite," he said, "but he's dumb as rocks. Won't listen to commands." Nathan doubted that. The dog Jim had described was highly trained, intelligent, more likely. Duke had learned that obeying Frank's commands only led to more abuse. Or Frank unhooked the chain from the stake but kept his grip on the collar. "You got a leash or something, he'll run first chance he gets." "I'll take the chain for now," Nathan said, not wanting to give Frank any reason to back out of the deal. With a shrug, Frank handed over the chain's end. "Your funeral? Dog's probably got all kinds of diseases. Waste of money if you ask me." Nathan said nothing, just wrapped the chain around his hand and turned to leave. He was halfway to the gate when Frank called after him. "Hey, one more thing you should know. That dog belonged to the cops before I got him. Trained attack dog. Might want to keep him away from your kid." Nathan paused, turning back. "I know exactly who he belonged to before, and what you did to him." Frank's face darkened. "You don't know nothing. Now get off my property before I change my mind." Duke followed Nathan hesitantly, legs trembling with each step, chain dragging between them. When they reached Nathan's truck, the dog balked, refusing to approach the vehicle. "It's okay," Nathan said softly, surprising himself. "No one's going to hurt you anymore." Duke looked up at him, those intelligent brown eyes seeming to assess the truth in his words. Then, with painful slowness, the dog lowered himself to the ground in front of Nathan, forelegs extending forward in a posture of complete submission. Nathan stood frozen, the chain slack in his hand, as he realized what he was witnessing. This wasn't just a dog cowering in fear. This was a soldier recognizing authority, a protector acknowledging a new charge. The drive home was silent except for Duke's labored breathing from the back seat. Nathan had managed to coax the dog into the truck after finding an old blanket in his toolbox to lay across the upholstery. Now, glancing in the rearview mirror, he could see Duke pressed against the door, as far from Nathan as the confined space would allow. "Almost there," Nathan said, more to fill the silence than because he thought the dog understood. To his surprise, Duke's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, eyes meeting Nathan's in the mirror before quickly looking away. Mrs. Wilson was standing on her front porch when Nathan pulled into his driveway, Lily beside her, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Nathan had called ahead to let them know he was on his way, though he'd been deliberately vague about whether his mission had been successful. As soon as the truck stopped, Lily broke free from Mrs. Wilson's restraining hand and raced across the lawn. Nathan quickly got out, intercepting her before she could fling open the back door. "Hold on, kiddo," he said, kneeling to her level. "I need you to be very calm. The dog, his name is Duke, is very scared and not feeling well. No sudden movements, no loud noises, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly, eyes wide. "Is he coming home with us for real?" "For now." Nathan hedged, still not entirely sure what he'd gotten himself into. "We'll see how it goes." He opened the back door of the truck slowly. Duke hadn't moved from his huddled position against the opposite door. Nathan unhooked the chain from the collar, a task made easier by the fact that the collar was now several sizes too large for Duke's emaciated neck, and held out his hand. "Come on, boy," he said softly. "It's okay." Duke remained frozen, eyes darting between Nathan, Lily, and the open door. His entire body trembled. "He's scared." "Dad," Lily whispered. "I know, honey. Let's give him a minute. Mrs. Wilson had made her way across the street by now, curiosity overcoming her usual reluctance to leave her property. "Good Lord," she exclaimed, peering into the truck. "That's not a dog. That's a skeleton with fur." Nathan shot her a warning look, but the damage was done. Duke shrank even further into himself at the sudden noise. "Let me try," Lily said. Before Nathan could stop her, she had clambered up onto the truck's running board, bringing herself level with the open door. She didn't reach in or make any sudden movements, just settled there with her hands folded in her lap. "Hi, Duke," she said in the same gentle tone Nathan had heard her use through the fence. "Remember me, I'm Lily. This is my dad. We're going to take care of you now." Duke's eyes fixed on Lily, recognition sparking in them. His tail moved once, a barely perceptible wag. "You can come out," she continued. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." To Nathan's amazement, Duke uncurled himself from his defensive position and inched forward across the seat. He paused at the edge, looking down at the ground as if judging the distance, his legs visibly shaking with weakness. "Dad," Lily whispered, "I think he needs help." Nathan stepped forward cautiously, telegraphing his movements. "Easy, boy. I'm just going to help you down." Duke flinched when Nathan's hands touched him, but didn't growl or snap. Nathan was shocked at how light the dog was as he carefully lifted him from the truck and set him on the grass. Duke's legs nearly buckled, but he managed to stay upright, his dignity apparently as important to him as his fear. "Martha," Nathan said, turning to Mrs. Wilson, "can you watch Lily for a bit longer? I need to take Duke to the vet right away." "Of course," Mrs. Wilson said, her earlier disapproval of the situation apparently forgotten in the face of Duke's obvious suffering. Poor creature. Some people ought not be allowed to keep animals. "Can't I come too?" Lily pleaded. "Not this time, honey. Dr. Collins needs to examine Duke, and it might take a while. I promise you can see him as soon as we get back." Reluctantly, Lily allowed Mrs. Wilson to lead her back across the street, turning every few steps to look at Duke. Nathan helped the dog back into the truck, noting how Duke seemed slightly less resistant this time. The Oak Ridge Veterinary Clinic was a small practice on the edge of town, run by Dr. Sarah Collins. Nathan had never been there himself, but Claire had taken their cat to Dr. Collins until old Milo passed away shortly before her accident. The parking lot was nearly empty when Nathan arrived, just 2 other cars present on the quiet Saturday afternoon. The receptionist looked up in alarm when Nathan half-carried Duke through the door. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's an emergency," Nathan explained. "I just got him from a bad situation." The young woman nodded, understanding, and picked up the phone. "Dr. Collins, we have an emergency case." "Yes, right away." Dr. Collins appeared moments later, wiping her hands on a paper towel. She was younger than Nathan had expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes behind simple glasses. Those eyes widened when she saw Duke. "Bring him straight back," she said, holding open a door to an examination room. "What happened to him?" "His name is Duke," Nathan began, helping the German shepherd onto the metal examination table. "He belonged to Frank Delaney. I just bought him today." Recognition flashed across Dr. Collins' face. "Frank Delaney," she repeated, her tone making the name sound like a diagnosis in itself. "I see." She ran her hands gently over Duke's body, the dog standing still but trembling under her touch. "How long has he been like this?" "I'm not sure. My daughter noticed him a couple of weeks ago." "He was already in bad shape then." Dr. Collins continued her examination in silence, checking Duke's eyes, ears, mouth, and paws with practiced efficiency. Duke submitted to it all with quiet stoicism, only flinching when she touched certain spots on his hindquarters. "He's severely malnourished," she finally said. "Dehydrated, too. There are pressure sores on his legs from lying on hard surfaces without proper bedding, and these marks here," she pointed to some partially healed wounds on his back, "are consistent with being struck with something narrow, like a stick or a rod." Nathan felt a surge of anger toward Frank Delaney. Will he be okay? With proper care, yes, but recovery will take time. She reached for a stethoscope. His heart sounds good, which is promising. No signs of heartworm from what I can tell, though we'll need to run tests to be sure. As she continued her examination, Dr. Collins asked questions about Duke's behavior, his mobility, and what Nathan knew of his history. Nathan shared what Sheriff Townsend had told him about Duke's past as a police dog. "That explains a few things," Dr. Collins said. "His response to commands, the way he's assessing everything, even in this state, his training shows through." She looked at Nathan with new interest. "It's not easy to rehabilitate a dog like this. Are you prepared for what that might entail?" Nathan hesitated. "I'm learning as I go." My daughter is the one who found him. She's determined to help him." Dr. Collins smiled slightly. "Children often have better instincts about these things than adults do." She made some notes on a chart. "I'd like to keep him overnight for fluids and observation, if that's all right with you. We can run some blood work, get a better idea of his overall health." "Of course," Nathan agreed, relieved to have a professional taking charge. "Whatever he needs. I'll put together a care plan for when you take him home. Special diet, medication for the pain and inflammation, gradual exercise to rebuild muscle." She paused, studying Nathan. "Have you ever had a dog before, Mr. Harlow?" "Nathan, please, and no, never. To be honest, I'm not really a dog person." Dr. Collins raised an eyebrow. "Yet here you are." "Here I am," Nathan agreed with a self-deprecating smile. "My late wife wanted a dog. My daughter needs one, I think. And this one needed us." Something in Dr. Collins' expression softened. "Well, you've certainly jumped into the deep end. But from what I know of German shepherds, and especially former working dogs, once you earn their trust, you couldn't ask for a more loyal companion." She scratched gently behind Duke's ears. And to Nathan's surprise, the dog leaned slightly into her touch. "You picked a good one, Duke," she said to the dog. "Now we just need to get you healthy again." When Nathan arrived home without Duke, Lily's face crumpled with disappointment. "Where is he? Didn't they let you keep him?" "Dr. Collins wants him to stay overnight," Nathan explained, settling beside her on the porch swing. "He needs special medicine and care right now. We can pick him up tomorrow afternoon." "But he'll be scared all alone," Lily protested. "He's in good hands," Nathan assured her. "And we need to get some things ready for him here. Dr. Collins gave me a list." Together, they spent the rest of the day preparing for Duke's arrival. They cleared out a corner of the living room, setting up an old comforter as a makeshift dog bed. Nathan made a trip to the pet store in the next town over, returning with food bowls, a proper leash and collar, and the special high-calorie food Dr. Collins had recommended. "Do you think he'll like this?" Lily asked, arranging a stuffed toy beside the dog bed. "I don't know if he knows how to play yet," Nathan said honestly, "but we can teach him when he's feeling better." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan found himself standing in the empty space they'd prepared for Duke. The reality of what he'd done was finally sinking in. He, Nathan Harlow, a man who'd avoided dogs his entire adult life, had just spent $500 on a traumatized German shepherd with unknown health problems and a potentially dangerous past. "What am I doing, Claire?" he whispered to the empty room. As always, no answer came. The next afternoon, Nathan and Lily returned to the veterinary clinic. Dr. Collins met them in an examination room where Duke was waiting, looking marginally better after 24 hours of professional care. An IV had been removed from his leg just before their arrival, but a blue bandage still wrapped the spot. "He's responding well to treatment," Dr. Collins reported. "The fluids have helped with his dehydration, and he ate a small meal this morning." "Can I pet him?" Lily asked, already moving closer to Duke. "Gently," Dr. Collins cautioned, "and let him see your hand first. so he knows you're not going to hurt him." Lily approached Duke with a patience that belied her 8 years, holding out her small hand for him to sniff before carefully stroking his head. Duke's tail moved in a tentative wag. "He remembers me," Lily said happily. "I think he does." Dr. Collins agreed. She turned to Nathan with a more serious expression. "I've put together detailed care instructions, including his feeding schedule, medication, and exercise limitations. The most important thing right now is to help him gain weight safely. Too much food too quickly could make him sick." Nathan nodded, taking the printed papers she offered. "Anything else we should know? Be patient with him," Dr. Collins advised. "He's been through a lot. He might have accidents in the house, even if he was previously trained. He might be fearful of certain objects or sounds. Just give him time and space when he needs it." "What about aggression?" Nathan asked quietly, mindful of Lily's presence but needing to know. Given his background as a police dog and what he's been through, Dr. Collins considered this. "I haven't seen any signs of aggression, which is remarkable given his treatment. But yes, it's something to be aware of. Don't put him in situations that might trigger fear or protective instincts until you've built more trust. No dog parks or crowded places for a while." She handed Nathan a business card. "My cell number is on the back. Call any time if you have concerns, day or night." Nathan tucked the card into his wallet, oddly comforted by the offer. "Thank you, Dr. Collins, for everything." "Sarah," she corrected with a smile. "And I'd like to see Duke again in 1 week to check his progress. Sooner if there are any problems." Getting Duke into the truck was easier this time, though he still moved with painful slowness. Lily sat in the back seat beside him, talking softly the entire ride home. Nathan noticed in the rearview mirror that while Duke didn't exactly relax, he seemed less tense in Lily's presence. The first few days with Duke were a careful dance of establishing routines and boundaries. Nathan set up the dog's bed in the living room, but Duke chose instead to sleep on the hardwood floor near the front door, perhaps keeping watch or preparing for a quick escape. He ate the special food cautiously, as if expecting it to be taken away, and flinched at sudden movements or loud noises. With Lily, however, Duke showed glimmers of his true nature. He would follow her from room to room when allowed, keeping a respectful distance but always watchful. When she read aloud from her books, he would listen with his head tilted, ears perked forward. It was Nathan who kept his distance, feeding and medicating Duke as required, but otherwise giving the dog a wide berth. He told himself it was to avoid stressing Duke further. But the truth was more complicated. Something about those intelligent brown eyes unsettled him, the way they seemed to look straight through his carefully constructed facade of coping to the grief and fear beneath. On the 4th night, Nathan was awakened by a sound from downstairs. He lay still, listening, until he heard it again, a low whine, followed by the click of nails on hardwood. Concerned that Duke might be in pain or needing to go outside, he pulled on a t-shirt and made his way downstairs in the darkness. Duke was pacing in front of the door to Lily's room, his movements agitated but silent except for an occasional whine. When he saw Nathan, he froze, eyes reflecting the dim light from the hallway. "What is it, boy?" Nathan whispered, approaching cautiously. "Need to go out." Duke didn't move toward the front door as Nathan expected. Instead, he looked pointedly at Lily's door, then back at Nathan, With a sense of alarm, Nathan opened Lily's door and slipped inside. His daughter was thrashing in her bed, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Before he could reach her, she cried out, "Mom, Mom, don't go." "Lily," Nathan said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Lily, wake up. You're dreaming." She woke with a gasp, tears already streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm here, kiddo. Just a bad dream." Lily threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "I saw Mom. She was walking away, and I couldn't catch up." "I know," Nathan murmured, rubbing her back. "I have those dreams too." A movement at the door caught his attention. Duke stood in the doorway, watching them with focused intensity. As if making a decision, he limped into the room and settled himself on the floor beside Lily's bed, his chin resting on his paws but his eyes alert. "Look," Nathan said gently, nodding toward the dog. "Duke was worried about you. He's the one who let me know you were having a bad dream." Lily looked down at Duke through her tears, a small smile breaking through. "Really? He was checking on me." "He was," Nathan confirmed, surprised by the lump forming in his own throat. "I think he's appointed himself your guardian." Lily reached down, her small hand finding Duke's head in the darkness. "Good boy," she whispered. "Thank you." When Lily had fallen back asleep, Nathan rose to return to his own room. Duke remained in place, clearly intending to stay by Lily's side for the rest of the night. "Okay," Nathan whispered to the dog. "You can stay. Just this once." But of course, it wasn't just once. From that night on, Duke slept on the floor beside Lily's bed, only leaving his post to go outside when necessary, or to eat his carefully measured meals. Under the combined care of the Harlows and Dr. Collins, who stopped by the house twice that week to check on her patient, Duke's physical condition began to improve. His coat regained some of its luster, and while still thin, his ribs became less prominently visible. More remarkable was the gradual emergence of Duke's personality. As his strength returned, so did hints of the proud, intelligent dog he had once been. He began to respond to basic commands, sitting and staying when Nathan asked, though still with a wariness that suggested he expected punishment rather than praise. Nathan found himself unexpectedly moved by Duke's resilience. During his morning coffee on the porch, he would watch Duke make his slow, careful survey of the yard's perimeter, a duty the dog had assigned himself. Despite everything he'd endured, Duke still had the instinct to protect, to serve. "He's a better man than his previous owner," Mrs. Wilson commented one afternoon, watching from her own porch as Lily gently brushed Duke's coat. "Though I suppose that's not saying much, considering it was that Delaney fellow." Word of Duke's rescue had spread through Oak Ridge's efficient gossip network. Nathan had fielded curious questions at work, and Lily reported that her teacher had praised her for helping save the dog. Not everyone was supportive. However, the Rusty Nail regulars, who counted Frank among their number, spread rumors that the dog was dangerous, unpredictable. "Military attack dog," Nathan overheard someone mutter at the hardware store. "Bred for violence. Shouldn't be around children." He ignored the whispers, focusing instead on Duke's steady improvement. The dog, who had cowered at sudden movements, now stood tall enough to rest his chin on the kitchen table, a habit Nathan discouraged but secretly admired. The painful slowness of his gait had given way to a more fluid, if still cautious, movement. Yet Duke remained wary of Nathan. He would accept food from his hand and obey his commands. But the trust that flowed so naturally between the dog and Lily was absent in his interactions with Nathan. Something held Duke back. Some invisible barrier Nathan couldn't identify. "Give it time," Sarah Collins advised during Duke's one-week checkup, which she conducted at the house to minimize the dog's stress. "Trust is earned, not given, especially with a dog who's been betrayed before." "He trusts Lily," Nathan pointed out, watching his daughter lead Duke through the simple tricks Sarah had suggested for his rehabilitation. "Children are easier," Sarah said. "They don't carry the same complications that adults do." "Duke senses your reservation." "My reservation?" Sarah gave him a knowing look. "You're still not sure about having him here? Are you part of you is still waiting for something to go wrong?" Nathan couldn't deny it. Despite Duke's progress, despite the undeniable positive effect the dog had on Lily, he still found himself tensing when Duke moved too quickly or barked at a passing car. "I'm trying," he said simply. "I know you are," Sarah replied, her hand briefly touching his arm. "And so is he." As she was leaving, Sarah paused by her car. "By the way, I filed a formal report about Duke's condition when you brought him in. Animal Control is investigating Frank Delaney." "Will anything come of it?" Nathan asked, skeptical after his conversation with Jim. "Probably not much," she admitted. "A fine, maybe. The system isn't great at punishment. Unfortunately." She hesitated. "Just be careful. Nathan, Frank's been asking around town about you and Duke. He's not happy about the investigation." Nathan nodded, absorbing this information. "Thanks for the warning." "Take care of that dog," Sarah said, sliding into her car. "He's special." Watching her drive away, Nathan looked back at the house where Duke sat in the window, observing his departure with alert attention. For the first time, Nathan truly understood what Sheriff Townsend had meant when he called Duke a hero. Beneath the scars and trauma, the German Shepherd's essential nature remained intact, loyal, watchful, protective. What Nathan didn't know was how soon those qualities would be tested. The confrontation came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Duke had joined the Harlow household. Nathan had just pulled into his driveway after picking up Lily from school when a faded blue pickup truck screeched to a halt at the curb. Frank Delaney climbed out, his movements unsteady, face flushed with anger or alcohol or both. "Harlow!" he shouted, stumbling toward the house. "I want a word with you. Inside." Duke erupted into deep, warning barks, a sound Nathan had never heard from him before. The transformation from silent, fearful animal to alert protector was startling. "Lily, go inside," Nathan said quietly, handing her the house key. "Lock the door and stay there." "But, Dad—" "Now, Lily." His tone brooked no argument. She took the key and hurried up the porch steps, casting anxious glances back at Frank. Duke's barking intensified when Lily entered, and Nathan could hear the dog's nails scrabbling at the inside of the door. Nathan moved to intercept Frank before he could reach the yard. "This is private property, Delaney. Whatever you want to say." Say it and leave." Frank's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, don't you? Setting the authorities on me, I got animal control crawling up my ass because of you." "That has nothing to do with me," Nathan replied evenly, though he knew Sarah's report was indeed the cause. "If you treated that dog properly, you wouldn't have anything to worry about." "I want him back," Frank said abruptly. Nathan stared at him. "What?" "The dog. I want him back." Frank swayed slightly, steadying himself against his truck. "Deal's off." "There's no deals off. I paid you $500 for Duke. He's mine now." Frank spat on the ground. "That was just to borrow him. I didn't say nothing about keeping him permanent." "That's not how it works. And you know it," Nathan said, anger rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "You sold him to me, fair and square." "Ain't nothing fair about it," Frank growled. "You saw how I was that day, half in the bag. Can't make binding agreements with a man in that condition. Any judge would say so." Nathan crossed his arms. "You're trespassing. Frank, leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff." Frank took a step closer, his sour breath washing over Nathan. "You don't want to make an enemy of me. Harlow, I know people in this town. I know things. Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Frank sneered. "That dog knows things too. Things you don't want getting out. Why do you think I kept him all this time? Insurance policy. That's what he was." The nonsensical statement confirmed Nathan's suspicion that Frank was drunk or high or both. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Jim right now." Frank backed up a step, wariness replacing some of the belligerence in his expression. "You think you're so righteous, your whole perfect little family." His gaze shifted to the house, where Lily's face was visible in the window beside Duke's. "Tell you what, I'll make it easy. Give me $1,000, and I'll forget the whole thing. The dog, the complaints, all of it." "You're extorting me now?" Nathan asked incredulously. "I'm offering you a solution." Frank insisted. "One that keeps certain information private. Ask your buddy the sheriff about the night your wife died. Ask him what was found at the scene." A cruel smile spread across his face. "You think it was just some random hit and run? There's always more to the story." "Harlow." Nathan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Frank couldn't possibly know anything about Claire's accident. He hadn't even lived in Oak Ridge then. Yet the specific mention of it, the insinuation that there was more to know, hit its mark with devastating accuracy. Before Nathan could respond, Duke's barking reached a new intensity. The front door burst open, and the German Shepherd bounded down the porch steps with a speed and strength Nathan hadn't witnessed before. Lily called out in alarm, but Duke was focused entirely on Frank Delaney. The dog didn't attack, but planted himself squarely between Nathan and Frank, hackles raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl. His transformation was remarkable. The cowering, broken animal was gone, replaced by an alert guardian radiating controlled aggression. Frank stumbled backward, genuine fear replacing the bravado on his face. "See, told you he was dangerous. That's an attack dog." "He's protecting his family," Nathan said, a strange pride mixing with his concern. He placed a steadying hand on Duke's back, feeling the coiled tension in the dog's muscles. "Duke, stay." To his surprise, Duke obeyed instantly, though his eyes never left Frank. The dog's demeanor confirmed what Nathan had suspected. Duke's training hadn't been forgotten, merely suppressed during his mistreatment. "You need to leave," Nathan told Frank. "Now, and don't come back." Frank backed toward his truck, pointing a shaking finger at Duke. "That dog's a menace. Everyone's going to know about this vicious animal, threatening me on a public street. You came onto my property and threatened me in front of my daughter," Nathan countered. "I've got nothing more to say to you. Stay away from my family." Frank climbed into his truck, slamming the door. "This ain't over. Harlow," he shouted through the open window as he pulled away, tires squealing on the asphalt. "Not by a long shot." Nathan waited until the truck disappeared around the corner before turning his attention to Duke. The dog was still standing at alert, trembling slightly from the effort or the adrenaline. When Nathan knelt beside him, Duke finally broke his stance, turning to lick Nathan's hand once before looking anxiously toward Lily. "It's okay, boy," Nathan said softly, a newfound respect in his voice. "You did good." Lily raced down the steps and threw her arms around Duke's neck. "You were so brave," she exclaimed, burying her face in his fur. Duke endured the embrace stoically, his eyes still scanning the street for threats. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan called Jim Townsend. He recounted Frank's visit and threats, including the disturbing reference to Claire's accident. "Bastard," Jim muttered when Nathan finished. "I'll have a talk with him. Make it clear that harassment won't be tolerated." "He said something about the night Claire died," Nathan pressed. "Said to ask you what was found at the scene. What did he mean by that?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Nothing," Jim finally said, but there was a hesitation in his voice that Nathan had never heard before. "Frank's just trying to get under your skin. He probably heard about the accident from town gossip and is using it to mess with you." "Jim," Nathan said slowly, "is there something you never told me about Claire's case?" "Nathan, don't do this to yourself," Jim advised. "It was a hit and run. The case is cold but not closed. If we ever get new information, you'll be the first to know." The conversation left Nathan unsettled. Jim was holding something back. He was certain of it. But what could it possibly be? And how could Frank Delaney of all people know about it? The next morning, Nathan dropped Lily at school and headed to work, but found himself unable to focus. Frank's words kept replaying in his mind, along with Jim's evasive response. By lunch, he'd made a decision. He told his foreman he needed the afternoon off and drove straight to the county courthouse. The records department was in the basement, a fluorescent-lit room lined with filing cabinets and staffed by a bored-looking clerk who barely glanced up from her computer when Nathan entered. "I need to see a file," he said. "A police report from 3 years ago. Hit-and-run accident on County Road 16. Victim was Claire Harlow." The clerk looked at him properly then. "Are you family of the deceased?" "I'm her husband." She nodded and asked for his ID, then disappeared into the rows of cabinets. Nathan waited, heart pounding. He'd read the police report before. Of course, in those horrible days after the accident, but he'd been in shock then, grief-stricken, barely processing the clinical details of his wife's death. Now, with Frank's insinuations ringing in his ears, he wondered what he might have missed. The clerk returned with a slim folder. "You can use the desk over there," she said, pointing to a small study carrel in the corner. "Just bring everything back when you're done." Nathan sat down and opened the folder with trembling hands. The report was much as he remembered it. Claire had been jogging along County Road 16 at dusk. A vehicle had struck her from behind and fled the scene. A passing motorist had found her body 30 minutes later. Death had been instantaneous due to massive head trauma. He forced himself to read every word, looking for anything unusual, any detail that might explain Frank's cryptic comments. Nothing stood out until he reached the evidence inventory at the back of the report. Item number 6, dog hair, German Shepherd type, recovered from victim's clothing, origin unknown. Nathan stared at the entry, reading it over and over. Dog hair, German Shepherd. On Claire's clothes, they hadn't owned a dog. Claire had been pushing for one, but they hadn't yet acted on it. So where had the dog hair come from? A cold realization began to form. Duke had been a police dog before somehow ending up with Frank. What if he had been there that night? What if he had been in the vehicle that hit Claire? It seemed impossible. Yet it would explain Frank's fixation on keeping Duke, his claim that the dog was an insurance policy, his panic when Nathan took Duke away and animal control started investigating. Nathan's thoughts were interrupted by the clerk clearing her throat. "Finding everything okay?" she asked, eyeing him curiously. "Yes, thank you," he said automatically. He closed the folder and returned it to her, his mind racing. He needed to talk to Jim again, to demand the full truth this time. As he drove home, another thought struck him. If Duke had been present at Claire's death, did he somehow recognize Nathan or Lily? Was that why he had been so protective of them from the beginning, especially Lily? Or was it all just a bizarre coincidence Nathan was so distracted by these thoughts that he almost missed the police cruiser parked in front of his house? As he pulled into the driveway, Sheriff Townsend emerged from the vehicle, his expression grim. "Jim," Nathan called, getting out of his truck. "What's going on?" "I was about to call you," Jim said, meeting him halfway up the walk. "There's been an incident. Frank Delaney filed a dangerous animal complaint against Duke this morning. Claims the dog tried to attack him unprovoked." "That's not what happened," Nathan protested. "Duke was protecting us after Frank showed up drunk and threatening." "I believe you," Jim said, raising a placating hand. "But Frank's got witnesses, his drinking buddies from the Rusty Nail, who claim they saw the whole thing. They're backing his story. They weren't even there. I know that, and you know that. But officially I've got multiple statements against yours." Jim looked genuinely regretful. "The town council's involved now. There's going to be a hearing." "A hearing for what?" "To determine if Duke should be classified as a dangerous animal under the town ordinance." Jim lowered his voice. "If he is, the recommendation will be euthanasia." Nathan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "They want to kill him, after everything he's been through. I'll do what I can," Jim promised. But Frank stirred up a lot of fear, talking about Duke's police background, claiming he was trained to attack. "Some folks are listening." "This is insane," Nathan said. "Duke hasn't hurt anyone. He defended his home, which is exactly what he should have done." "The hearing's set for Friday morning at the town hall," Jim said. "I suggest you get a lawyer, Nathan. Frank's not playing games anymore." As Jim turned to leave, Nathan called after him. "I went to the courthouse today. I saw Claire's file." Jim froze, then slowly turned back. "Nathan. Dog hair. Jim, German Shepherd dog hair on her clothes. Were you ever going to tell me?" The sheriff's face sagged, the lines around his mouth deepening. "I wanted to," Nathan, God knows I wanted to. But we had no proof, no witnesses. Just that one piece of evidence that could have meant anything. It didn't mean anything to me then, Nathan said. But it does now. Frank Delaney knows something about Claire's death, doesn't he? And it involves Duke somehow? Jim glanced around, making sure they were alone. Not here, he said quietly. Meet me at the station tonight, after hours. There are things you need to know. The holding facility for Oak Ridge Animal Control was a small concrete building behind the county maintenance yard, with chain-link kennels arranged in two facing rows. It had been designed for stray cats and the occasional raccoon, not for cases like Duke's. Nathan stood at the entrance, Lily's small hand clutched tightly in his, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "Remember what I said," he reminded her gently. "Duke might seem scared or different. We need to stay calm for him." Lily nodded solemnly. "I brought his favorite toy," she said, holding up the stuffed squirrel she'd insisted on buying despite Duke's initial indifference to toys. In recent days, he'd taken to carrying it carefully around the house, a sign of his growing comfort. The animal control officer, a young man with a sympathetic expression, led them through a door marked "Quarantine." "He's in here," he explained. "Had to separate him from the other animals, big dog like that. They get nervous." Duke was in the last kennel, a space barely large enough for him to turn around. When he saw them, he stood at attention, a low whine escaping his throat. The change in him after just 2 days was heartbreaking. His posture had reverted to the fearful crouch they'd first seen at Frank's, his eyes darting nervously around the concrete enclosure. "Duke," Lily whispered, pressing against the chain link. "We came to see you." The German shepherd approached cautiously, sniffing at her fingers through the fence. When he recognized her scent, his tail gave a single wag. "Can we go in with him?" Nathan asked the officer. "Not supposed to allow it," the young man said, then glanced at Lily's crestfallen face. "But I can make an exception for a few minutes. Just don't tell my boss." He unlocked the kennel, and Lily rushed in, throwing her arms around Duke's neck. The dog stood rigidly at first, then gradually relaxed, leaning into her embrace. Nathan entered more slowly, his heart twisting at the visible regression in Duke's condition. The dog's ribs were showing again, his coat dull, the confidence they'd worked so hard to build visibly diminished. "Has he been eating?" Nathan asked, noticing the full food bowl in the corner. The officer shook his head. "Barely touched it since he got here. We tried different kinds, but—" He shrugged. "Some dogs don't handle the stress well." Nathan knelt beside Duke, running a hand along his back. The dog trembled under his touch, but didn't pull away. "We're going to get you out of here, boy," he promised quietly. "Just hang on a little longer." Their visit was cut short by the arrival of the facility supervisor, who reminded them firmly of the rules against interacting with animals under quarantine. As they were escorted out, Duke pressed against the fence, watching them leave with such naked longing that Lily burst into tears in the parking lot. "It's not fair," she sobbed as Nathan knelt to comfort her. "He didn't do anything wrong. He was protecting us." "I know, kiddo," Nathan said, holding her close. "And we're going to prove that. The hearing is tomorrow morning. We just need to tell the truth about what happened." But as they drove home, Nathan wasn't sure the truth would be enough. His meeting with Jim the previous night had revealed disturbing connections that cast the entire situation in a new light. According to Jim, Frank Delaney hadn't just appeared in Oak Ridge by coincidence 5 years ago. He'd been hired as a night security guard at the same trucking company that owned the vehicle suspected in Claire's hit-and-run. The evidence had been circumstantial flecks of blue paint on Claire's running clothes that matched the company's fleet, a damaged front bumper on one of the trucks reported after the accident date. But with no witnesses and no confession, the case had stalled. The German Shepherd hair found on Claire's clothing had been a puzzle until Duke entered the picture. Jim had recognized the dog from news coverage of the police K9 unit, but couldn't place why Frank had him until Nathan bought Duke and the animal abuse investigation began. Records showed that Duke had been retired from police service shortly before Claire's death. The officer who'd been transporting him to his new home reported that Duke had escaped during a rest stop near Oak Ridge. For 2 weeks, the dog had been missing. Jim's theory, shared reluctantly in the privacy of his office, was that Duke had witnessed Claire's accident, perhaps even been in the vehicle that hit her. Whether he'd been picked up by the driver afterward or found his way to the trucking company while searching for help, somehow he'd ended up with Frank Delaney. Frank might have been driving that night, Jim had said grimly. Or he might have helped cover it up. Either way, he kept Duke to make sure the dog couldn't somehow identify the vehicle or driver. It seemed far-fetched. Yet it explained Frank's insistence on keeping a dog he clearly didn't want or care for, his panic when Duke was removed from his control, and his desperate attempts to either get Duke back or have him destroyed. What it didn't explain was why Duke had responded so positively to Lily from the beginning, or why he had placed himself protectively between the Harlows and Frank. If Duke associated Nathan's family with trauma, shouldn't he have feared them too? The town hall was packed the next morning for Duke's hearing. Nathan had arranged for Mrs. Wilson to keep Lily home. Despite her tearful protests, this wasn't something she needed to witness, especially if the outcome went against them. Nathan had dressed in his best clothes, the same suit he'd worn to Claire's funeral, hanging loosely on his frame now. Sarah Collins sat beside him at the respondent's table, having volunteered to testify about Duke's condition and behavior during treatment. On the opposite side of the room, Frank Delaney slouched in a chair, flanked by 3 men Nathan recognized as regulars from the Rusty Nail. The hearing was presided over by the town council's 5 members, with the mayor acting as chairman. None of them had legal training, but the town ordinance on dangerous animals gave them authority to make the decision. The proceedings were informal statements from the complainant, testimony from witnesses, evidence from the respondent, followed by deliberation and ruling. Frank spoke first, delivering a rehearsed account of how Duke had viciously lunged at him without provocation when he stopped by to check on the dog's welfare. His drinking buddies nodded along, ready to corroborate his story despite having been nowhere near Nathan's house that day. When it was Nathan's turn, he recounted the true version of events: Frank's drunken arrival, his threats, Duke's protective but controlled response. He emphasized that Duke hadn't bitten or even touched Frank, merely placed himself between a perceived threat and his family. Duke is a retired police K9, Nathan explained. He was trained to protect, and that's exactly what he did. Not with violence, but with presence. Sarah's testimony came next, detailing Duke's physical and psychological condition when Nathan first brought him in. She displayed photographs of the pressure sores, the malnutrition, the healing wounds from repeated beatings. Several council members winced at the images. In my professional opinion, Sarah concluded, Duke shows no signs of inappropriate aggression. What he does show are the classic stress responses of an abused animal who has formed a new, healthy attachment to a family that treats him with kindness. Frank's attorney, a court-appointed public defender who seemed barely interested in the case, attempted to undermine Sarah's testimony by questioning her objectivity. "Isn't it true you've been spending time with the Harlow family outside of your professional capacity? Dr. Collins?" Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I've made house calls to check on Duke's recovery." "Yes, that's standard practice for a case like this." As the hearing continued, Nathan became increasingly aware of the whispers and pointed looks from the audience. News traveled fast in Oak Ridge, and rumors about Duke's connection to Claire's accident had clearly begun to circulate. People who had smiled and nodded at him for years now regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. When the council called a recess to deliberate, Nathan stepped outside for air. The late September sun offered little warmth, and he shivered in the thin suit jacket. 3 years of grief, and now this fresh pain, the possibility of losing Duke just when the dog had started to heal, to trust again. "Mr. Harlow." He turned to find one of the animal control officers approaching, her expression grave. "There's been a development," she said quietly. "You need to come with me right away." "What is it? What's happened?" "It's Duke," she said. "He's not doing well. Dr. Collins is with him now. But she asked me to find you immediately." Nathan drove behind the animal control van, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, pushing the speed limit all the way to the facility. The officer had been vague about Duke's condition, saying only that the dog had taken a turn and refused to eat or drink since the previous day's visit. The concrete building looked even more bleak in the harsh midday sun. Nathan parked haphazardly and rushed inside, directed by the front desk attendant to the quarantine area where he'd visited Duke the day before. He found Sarah kneeling beside the German shepherd, who lay motionless on the concrete floor of his kennel. "What happened?" Nathan demanded, dropping to his knees beside them. Sarah's face was drawn with concern. "Stress-induced gastric torsion, his stomach twisted. It's common in deep-chested breeds, especially under extreme stress." She had an IV line running into Duke's foreleg, and monitoring equipment Nathan hadn't seen the day before had been set up in the small space. "I've stabilized him for now, but he needs surgery. The nearest veterinary surgical center is in Charlottesville." Duke's eyes were open but unfocused, his breathing shallow. When Nathan placed a gentle hand on his head, the dog didn't respond. "Why didn't anyone call me sooner?" Nathan asked, anger mixing with his fear. "They found him like this during morning rounds," Sarah explained. "I came immediately, but I've been focused on keeping him alive." She hesitated. "Nathan, there's something else you should know. I found this while examining him." She handed him a small plastic evidence bag containing what looked like a grain of rice. "It's a microchip, a specialized one used only by law enforcement canine units. It contains his entire service record." "I thought you checked for a chip when I first brought him in." "I did, with a standard scanner. This one operates on a different frequency, only detectable with police equipment." The animal control officer happened to have the right scanner when they admitted Duke. She met his eyes. "I've read his file, Nathan. It confirms everything Jim suspected, and more." Before she could elaborate, the facility's front door banged open, and voices echoed down the corridor. Nathan recognized Jim Townsend's authoritative tone, followed by the mayor's higher pitch and a third voice he couldn't immediately place. "We're in here," Sarah called out, rising to her feet. Jim appeared in the doorway, still in his sheriff's uniform, looking harried. Behind him came Mayor Atkins and a tall, gray-haired man in an expensive suit whom Nathan didn't recognize. "What's going on?" Nathan asked, standing protectively beside Duke. "This is Thomas Weldon," Jim said, indicating the suited man. "He's the State Attorney General's special investigator. He's here about Duke." Weldon stepped forward, his expression grave but kind. "Mr. Harlow, I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting. I've been investigating a case that I believe involves your dog." "He needs emergency surgery," Nathan said. "Whatever this is about, it's about your wife's death, Mr. Harlow." Weldon interrupted gently. "And a trucking company called Midland Transport. And yes, it involves Duke." The world seemed to tilt beneath Nathan's feet. "What?" Jim put a steadying hand on Nathan's shoulder. "Hear him out. Nate, this changes everything." Weldon gestured to the kennel. "May I?" Sarah nodded, moving aside to give him access to Duke. The investigator knelt beside the German shepherd, examining the microchip in the evidence bag Sarah had provided. 3 years ago," Weldon began, "Duke was being transferred from his police handler to a retirement home during a rest stop near Oak Ridge. He escaped his transport. We now believe he was deliberately released by someone who recognized his value." Nathan sank onto the bench outside the kennel, struggling to process what he was hearing. At the time of his disappearance, Duke was returning from his final assignment, an undercover operation at Midland Transport. The company was suspected of running drugs along with legitimate cargo. Duke's handler had been posing as a dispatcher, and Duke had been used to sweep the trucks. "What does this have to do with my wife?" Nathan asked hoarsely. Weldon's expression softened. "The night your wife died, Duke wasn't just a witness to a hit and run, Mr. Harlow. He was evidence. His presence at the scene, confirmed by the hair samples found on your wife's clothing, connects her death directly to Midland Transport." "I don't understand." "We believe your wife saw something she shouldn't have while jogging that evening, possibly a drug transfer in progress. Duke would have recognized the illegal substances. If she was struck by a Midland truck, Duke's presence at the scene would have constituted evidence of both the hit and run and the drug operation," Sarah interjected. "The microchip records show Duke was specifically trained to respond to evidence of narcotics by freezing in place and indicating silently. He wouldn't have barked or given away his presence." "After your wife's death," Weldon continued, "Duke disappeared completely. The investigation into Midland stalled without his evidence. Then Frank Delaney showed up in Oak Ridge with a German shepherd that he claimed was a pet. Frank worked night security for Midland," Jim added. "He was on duty the night Claire was killed. We suspect he was involved in covering up the accident." Duke was his insurance policy, Nathan realized, Frank's words now making terrible sense. As long as he controlled Duke, he had leverage over whoever was really responsible. "Exactly," Weldon confirmed. "We believe Delaney has been blackmailing someone at Midland for years, threatening to reveal Duke's existence if they didn't pay him off." Mayor Atkins, who had been silently absorbing this information, finally spoke up. "This is all very disturbing, but what does it mean for the dangerous animal hearing the council is waiting to reconvene?" Weldon stood, brushing off his immaculate suit. "It means, Mr. Mayor, that Duke is now evidence in a federal investigation. He's coming with me. regardless of your town's decision. No, Nathan said firmly, surprising himself with the force of his objection. Duke needs emergency surgery, and after that, he's coming home with me. Weldon frowned. Mr. Harlow, I understand your attachment to the animal, but Duke isn't just evidence, Nathan interrupted, moving to stand beside the ailing German shepherd. He's family. Whatever you need from him, testimony, identification, anything, you can have it, but he stays with us. Jim stepped forward. Tom, you know I respect your authority, but Nathan's right. That dog has been through hell. He deserves to be with people who care about him, and he needs surgery now, Sarah added urgently. Every minute we delay puts him at greater risk. The special investigator studied Duke, then looked at the faces surrounding him. Finally, he nodded. I'll arrange a police escort to the veterinary center in Charlottesville. Mr. Harlow can accompany Duke, and we'll discuss next steps after the animal is stabilized. And the hearing, Mayor Atkins asked. Tell the council that Duke is now under federal protection as a material witness. Weldon instructed. Any proceedings against him are suspended indefinitely. As the mayor hurried off to deliver this news, Weldon turned to Nathan. I'll need a formal statement from you, but it can wait until after Duke's surgery. For now, you should know that your cooperation may finally bring justice for your wife. Nathan felt as if a great weight had been simultaneously lifted from his shoulders and placed upon them. The possibility of answers after 3 years of uncertainty was overwhelming. But seeing Duke lying there, fighting for his life, reminded him of the immediate crisis. We need to get him to Charlottesville, he said to Sarah. Can he be moved? She nodded, already preparing a transport carrier. I've stabilized him enough for the journey, but we need to hurry. Within 20 minutes, Duke had been carefully loaded into Sarah's SUV. The back seat converted into a makeshift medical transport with blankets and monitoring equipment. Nathan sat beside him, one hand resting gently on the dog's side, feeling the shallow rise and fall of his breathing. Hold on, boy, he whispered as Sarah pulled onto the highway, the promised police escort clearing their path with flashing lights. We've come too far to lose you now. The drive to Charlottesville passed in a blur of anxiety. Nathan called Mrs. Wilson to explain the situation, asking her to keep Lily occupied and promising to update them as soon as he could. He couldn't bring himself to tell his daughter how serious Duke's condition had become. Not over the phone. At the veterinary surgical center, a team was waiting for them. Alerted by Weldon's office, Duke was whisked away on a gurney, leaving Nathan and Sarah in a sterile waiting room with institutional chairs and old magazines. What are his chances? Nathan asked when they were alone, the question he'd been too afraid to voice in front of Duke. Sarah's professional composure slipped slightly. It's serious. Nathan, the torsion itself is treatable with surgery, but his overall condition, the stress, the previous malnutrition, the age of his injuries, complicates things. She reached for his hand. But he's strong, and he has something to live for now. Nathan nodded, throat too tight for words. He found himself thinking of Claire, of her insistence that Lily needed a dog, of the cruel irony that Duke had been present at her death only to become part of their lives years later. Was it possible that some thread of connection had remained? That Duke had recognized something of Claire in Lily? It seemed impossible. Yet, no more impossible than the series of events that had brought them together. "Family of Duke," a surgical nurse called from the doorway, startling Nathan from his thoughts. He and Sarah rose together. "The surgeon is ready to begin," the nurse informed them. "She'd like to speak with you first about the procedure and risks," as they followed her through swinging doors into the treatment area. Nathan caught a glimpse of Duke on the surgical table, surrounded by medical equipment, so still and vulnerable, the dog who had survived abuse, who had protected Lily, who might hold the key to justice for Claire, now fought his most difficult battle yet. And for the first time since bringing Duke home, Nathan admitted to himself just how much he needed the dog to survive, not for Lily's sake, not for Claire's memory, but for himself. Somewhere in the process of saving Duke, the German Shepherd had begun to save him too. 1 year later, Nathan sat on the front porch swing, watching as golden autumn leaves drifted across the yard. Duke lay at his feet, no longer the skeletal creature he'd rescued, but a proud, healthy German shepherd with a glossy coat and clear, intelligent eyes. The only visible reminder of his ordeal was a small patch of white fur on his side, where the surgery scar had healed. "Your coffee's getting cold," Sarah said, stepping through the front door with her own mug cradled between her hands. She settled beside him on the swing, her shoulder pressing comfortably against his. "Just enjoying the view," Nathan replied, smiling as Lily raced across the yard. Duke immediately alert and following her movements with devoted attention. The past year had brought changes Nathan could never have anticipated. Duke's surgery had been successful, though his recovery had been long and punctuated with setbacks. For the first week, Nathan had slept on the waiting room floor of the veterinary hospital, returning home only to check on Lily before rushing back to Charlottesville. When Duke was finally released, weak but healing, the investigation into Claire's death had accelerated with stunning speed. Frank Delaney, confronted with evidence of his involvement, had crumbled quickly, turning state's witness in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony had led to the arrest of Midland Transport's owner and 3 drivers, including the man who had struck Claire that night. The truth, when it finally emerged, had been both simpler and more terrible than Nathan had imagined. Claire had been jogging along her usual route when she'd witnessed a drug handoff involving a Midland truck. Duke, riding in the vehicle as part of his undercover work, had alerted to the presence of narcotics just as Claire appeared. The driver, panicking, had struck her deliberately to silence a potential witness, then fled the scene. Duke had somehow escaped the vehicle, whether he'd jumped out to reach Claire or been abandoned by the fleeing driver remained unclear. Frank, arriving as night security to clean up the scene, had found the German Shepherd standing guard over Claire's body. Recognizing the dog's value as leverage, he'd taken Duke and hidden him away, using the animal's existence to blackmail the driver and, by extension, Midland's owner. The trial had been difficult, forcing Nathan to relive the worst day of his life through clinical evidence and dispassionate testimony, but it had also brought closure, a final understanding of what had happened to the woman he'd loved. Duke had been a central figure in the proceedings, his microchip and training records providing crucial evidence that connected all the pieces. "Dad, watch this," Lily called, breaking into his reverie. She held up a yellow tennis ball, immediately capturing Duke's complete attention. The dog's entire body tensed in anticipation, though he remained seated until given permission to move, a testament to the training they'd worked on together over the past months. "Go ahead," Nathan called back, and Lily threw the ball with all her strength. Duke launched into action, a blur of black and tan against the autumn landscape, catching the ball in mid-air with balletic grace. Sarah laughed, the sound warming Nathan from the inside. Her presence in their lives had begun as Duke's veterinarian, but had evolved into something much more. Her steadiness during Duke's health crisis, her unwavering support through the investigation and trial, had created a bond that grew naturally into affection, and then into love. "He doesn't look like the same dog," she observed, watching as Duke trotted proudly back to Lily, ball held gently in his mouth. "None of us are the same," Nathan replied, reaching for her hand. The changes went beyond Duke's physical recovery or the resolution of Claire's case. Lily had blossomed, the serious child gradually giving way to a more carefree, confident girl. Nathan had witnessed the transformation with wonder and gratitude, recognizing Duke's role in healing wounds that had seemed beyond repair. As for Nathan himself, the difference was perhaps most profound. The fear that had defined his relationship with dogs since childhood had dissolved in the face of Duke's loyalty and courage. The grief that had hollowed him out after Claire's death hadn't disappeared. It never would. But it had evolved into something he could carry without being crushed by its weight. And Duke, once a broken creature existing on the edges of survival, had reclaimed his essential nature. The proud canine officer, the loyal protector, the gentle companion, all aspects of his character that Frank Delaney had tried to destroy, but had only managed to suppress temporarily. "I have something to show you," Sarah said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. "It came through this morning." Nathan took it curiously. Inside was an official certificate bearing the state seal and Duke's name, along with Nathan's. "What's this?" "It's Duke's official designation as a therapy dog," Sarah explained, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "We're approved to visit the children's ward at Charlottesville Memorial. Once a week to start, more if it goes well." Nathan stared at the certificate, momentarily speechless. The idea had been Lily's originally that Duke, having experienced such suffering and healing, might help others who were hurting. Sarah had embraced the concept, guiding them through the training and certification process over the past 6 months. He passed, Nathan finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. "With flying colors," Sarah confirmed. The evaluator said she's rarely seen a dog with such natural empathy and control. From across the yard, Duke lifted his head, seeming to sense he was the topic of conversation. His ears perked forward, his gaze steady and alert, the very picture of the noble animal he was always meant to be. "Duke, dinner," Lily called, heading toward the house with the tennis ball in hand. The German shepherd gave one final look at Nathan and Sarah, as if seeking permission, then trotted after the girl who had first shown him kindness through a chain-link fence. "You know," Sarah said softly as they rose to follow. "Some people would say it was just coincidence, Duke ending up with Frank. Your daughter finding him. All of it leading to justice for Claire. But I've been a vet long enough to believe there's more to animals than we understand." Nathan nodded, thinking of the moment Duke had knelt before him that first day, of the way the dog had recognized Lily from the beginning, of his unfailing instinct to protect them both. "Claire would have loved him," he said simply. "I think she led him to you," Sarah replied, in her own way. Inside, the warm light of the kitchen spilled onto the porch as Lily held the door open, waiting for them. Duke sat at perfect attention beside her, the perfect picture of patience and devotion. As Nathan and Sarah stepped into the house together, Duke rose to follow them, crossing the threshold not as a rescued animal or a piece of evidence, but as what he had truly become, the heart of a family that had found its way back to wholeness. At the center of the kitchen table sat a framed photograph that hadn't been there a year ago. Nathan, Lily, Sarah, and Duke, the four of them captured in a moment of genuine happiness by Mrs. Wilson during last month's Labor Day barbecue. Beside it stood the older photo of Claire, no longer isolated in grief, but incorporated into the new life they had built. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan found Duke in his customary spot outside her door, standing guard as he did every night. The German shepherd looked up as Nathan approached, his brown eyes wise and somehow knowing. "Good boy, Duke," Nathan whispered, kneeling to embrace the dog who had changed everything. "Good boy." When life deals its cruelest blows, sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. Duke's story reminds us that it's never too late for second chances. Whether you're a broken-down German shepherd or a grief-stricken family trying to find your way forward, many of us know what it means to face loss, the empty chair at the dinner table, the voice we'll never hear again, the plans left unfulfilled. We understand how grief can hollow us out, leaving us shadows of who we once were. But Duke's journey from a skin-and-bone dog to a beloved family member shows us that even our deepest wounds can heal with time, patience, and love. It takes courage to open our hearts again after they've been shattered. It takes faith to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. And sometimes it takes the unwavering loyalty of a dog who's seen the worst of humanity, yet still chooses to love, to protect, to forgive.